And so I left. I went to the other side. And when I went to the other side, like I saw this beautiful heavenly place, and there seemed like there was all these amazing beings dancing, and they were all on mountaintops. And I just felt so much joy and happiness, and I didn't want to come back at all.
One look and I breathe.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Awakening to Love podcast. I am the Ascension Coach, James Valentine, here with this beautiful soul, Dr. Pantea Leonati. She is a spiritually gifted healer and doctor of psychology, and we are really excited I'm really excited to speak to her today. And I think she's going to answer a lot of questions that many of you have. And having said that, welcome to the Awakening to Love podcast, Dr. Leonati.
Thank you for inviting me to come share this messages with your audience and chat with you all on all these good topics.
Absolutely. Well, they like to jump right into it, so that's what we're going to do. Tell us actually, let's start here. Who were you before your NDE experience? And then just kind of go from there into your NDE experience.
Okay, so who I was before my NDE, I was doing psychology work, spiritual energy aspects of psychology, and I always had a connection with God. So, I call it my intuition, my inner voice. And so I was kind of like mystically guided on my journey up until that point. But before I had my NDE 2 years ago, I was really sick for like a good 5-6 years. Like the pain was so bad where I was like on the floor. I couldn't get out of bed 3-4 days a week. So I was like working, but the other days I was literally in bed. So it was kind of just like go heal people, then come home and rest just to recover. And so when I had my NDE, it was after a surgery, which they did. I think it was the fourth surgery I had in eight years. That fourth surgery was the one that basically nearly killed me, right? And the other 3 surgeries weren't as big deal, but this one was supposed to be another minus surgery. The doctor just kind of said, oh, we're going to put a balloon in your nose and make you breathe better. Maybe that'll make all the pains you're having finally calm down. I was like, all right. So I go to my NDE, and he ends up during the surgery cracking my skull, where the liquids of my brain are coming out of my nose, and I didn't know he cracked my skull. And so for a few days, I was at home just having liquids coming out of my nose, thinking it was just blood or water, normal surgery. But I was having really intense pains and that kind of stuff. But so I had to go back to the hospital for 5-6 days because I sneezed and something cracked. Like I literally felt something stretch in my head. I fell to the floor, and I just somehow got on the phone, called my mom. And so when they took me to the ER, I had like 30 bubbles in my brain. I always joke with people like I'm an airhead. So don't get mad at me if I say the wrong word, guys. I'm an airhead. So, but yeah, so that happened while I was in the hospital for 3 days. At some point, my head was so swollen, and I was all alone in the hospital. I think only one day I had visitors. And so I left. I went to the other side. And when I went to the other side, like I saw this beautiful heavenly place, and there seemed like there was all these amazing beings dancing, and they were all on mountaintops. And I just felt so much joy and happiness, and I didn't want to come back at all. I just kind of wanted to stay there. And I heard God's voice, being very loving and comforting, how I've always felt the Father, whatever you call it, in whatever religion, I believe there is a like a father, like a grandfather energy. And he was speaking to me, and he said, like, I know all the pain you've been through, you've been sick, that kind of thing. And if you want to come home, you can. And then he said, but if you go back, you'll be able to help people with all the changes that are about to come for humanity, and I was just kind of like, okay. So then I ended up coming back into my body in the hospital, and I just heard all the, alarms and beeps because I was in ICU. So there was all these sounds everywhere and monitored, people screaming. But yeah, that was very interesting. And ever since I came back, what changed is that I went back to being a child. That part in the Bible where God says, you shall be like children to enter heaven again. So it's kind of like that. Like a lot of my memories went away, to be honest. I'd been through a lot. Like I had a lot of traumas. I had physical trauma, all kinds of trauma. So I was like all of us, I kind of had this feeling of like, like a heaviness, like I was an adult. And then in my work, I'd seen so many children being abused. I'd seen women being abused. I'd worked with men with sexual trauma. I'd worked with felons, gang members. So I had seen like the dark side of our world in my career, so before 2 years ago, that was with me. It was always with me. And so that joy, giddy kid feeling that I didn't have it anymore. But then when I had the NDE, now I can see the darkness and I'm still giggling. Like I was literally in the hospital, family member, blood clots coming out of their nose. And I was just praying for them and dancing for them to try to keep their spirit up. And that was like God's energy keeping me peaceful in like, which I consider hell as hospitals in our world, you know?
Yeah.
So that's kind of was interesting to me. How can I be in so much worry for my loved one, but at the same time have
Yeah.
the spirit of joy, which is what God always says, right? God says, I'm joy, I'm peace.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
one thing to feel it for moments, but it's another thing when it becomes like a constant almost, even in like the craziest moments, I'm always giggling now.
I love that. And in a minute, we're going to go into these dark energies and how to
Sure.
navigate that. But I want to go back to the mountains and the I think you called it in one of the land of the dancing gods. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to see that
Yeah.
mountains here, people are that like when you say dancing gods, is
Yeah.
that like
They were actually
Jesus
moving. They were literally dancing. Yeah, they were literally like, you know how like sometimes kung fu masters do these things. So some of them were doing
yeah,
that. And then there was like these ancient goddesses that were just like on like, you know, floating and like kind of dancing in like the
yeah,
galactic space. And then like there was Buddha, there was all these different ones. But what I like to say is like it looked like they were in their essence. What I mean by that is like,
yeah.
you know, when we talk about Jesus, like they describe his character, or when they talk about Buddha, like they were dancing the way I had pictured they would dance as humans.
This is what really gravitated toward me and had me reach out. And this is obviously something you were familiar with before your NDE,
Mhm.
but you just said it, and I heard you say it before. But the many heavens,
Mhm.
I was, I understand the concept. Like I understand even from talking about we're going to have an experience that resonates most with us. So every person's version of heaven may be different. One may have Jesus show up, one may have Buddha show up, one may have
Yes.
dancing gods show up.
Yeah.
So when did you tell us a little bit about the many heavens? I'm not sure everybody is familiar.
All right. So I read about the concept of many heavens in the book Bhagavad Gita, which, you know, is basically like the Bible of the Hindus.
Yeah,
And
I
it
read that. Yeah,
read it? You read it?
yeah. A few times. Yeah,
But in that book, it also has an explanation of like spiritual, like secrets, you could say. And in that book, I remember Krishna said, like, there's all these different heavens, and depending on like your state of consciousness, you will get to go to these
yeah,
different heavens. And I remember always thinking, I want to go to the one where there's going to be the dancing God one. And I don't know if I
yeah.
saw that exact wording there, but I just remember him saying that. And he said, like in the book, God says, like, if your heart is pure and you do karma yoga, which what does karma yoga mean? Karma yoga means live your life to be of service or something like that to humanity. And then your heart is pure, and then you build a relationship with God, whatever that means to you, those few things, then you get to go to the highest heavens.
If I'm not correct, the religion you had growing up was Islam, correct?
Hmm. Yeah.
Growing up with that religion, what made you go, let me see what this book is about, or having these other mystical experiences? How did you navigate that?
Like, how did I, like, why was I interested in all of them except just
Yeah,
kind of thing?
yeah,
But in the Quran, it talks about all the other prophets. So in the Quran, I remember reading about Jesus, and I was like, I like this guy's energy. As a kid, I remember thinking, this one feels really powerful. He can heal people. And I like that because they would talk about the different prophets in there and they would teach it to us in school. Yeah, but
hmm,
then when I saw the other prophets, like names in there, so I would read about Moses, Christ, Moses, you know, Solomon and David and, you know, Fatima and Mother Mary, like the saints. I was like fascinated by these characters.
a lot. Okay, so two things. You had been hearing God's voice
Mhm.
even before that, right? Like, when did that start?
I feel like since I was a kid, you know, and I think a lot of us
Yeah.
are hearing God's voice, we might just not know, you know, because God is our intuition, it's our soul, right? But for me, it happened. I
Hmm.
had a very bad trauma, you know, when I was just like 4 or 5 years old, and it was such a bad trauma that I don't know if like I seeked God or how I started suddenly hearing this voice guiding me. But I remember even as the trauma was occurring, I heard a voice like telling me to leave. And like, so I always felt like there was something kind of guiding me. And I didn't know it was God, right? Like I
Right.
really until my NDE, it wasn't proven to me that it was God. Because I had a clinical psychology background, so I didn't hear the voices in my head as like God, let's say. I was still kind of, is this God? I think it's God, but I'm 99% sure, but how can I be 100% sure I'm not making it up, kind of thing? Like all these coincidences, I think a lot of spiritual people think that, well, that couldn't have been a coincidence. That couldn't have been a coincidence, but I don't know. It just seems like it's very accurate. And when I don't listen to it, it always something weird happens, right? So I'm even much more careful. Even when I'm driving, I'm constantly talking to God, like, should I go right here or straight? And it's not always a voice. Sometimes God talks to us in all of our senses, is the best way I can say it. So suddenly you could be
Right.
driving and you smell your grandmother's perfume. That could be your grandmother next to you that has
Mm,
passed, you know?
yeah.
Or you suddenly feel like a really bad feeling in your heart when you meet a new person. That's God warning you, not like you should judge this person, but just don't get close to this person. Something is going on. Or maybe the person has heartache and you're feeling their pain, so you have compassion for them.
Yeah.
So God also talks to us through our feeling in our body, I believe, you know.
I hear this among NDEs more times than not, that when it comes time to, okay, it's time for you to go back, they're more or less kicking and screaming. What made you go, okay? Because it doesn't sound like you put up any resistance. Here's these dancing gods, these beautiful mountains. God is talking to you. But you're like, no, I'm good. I go back.
I think
What
part of
made that
it is
okay?
like, to me, like, the people I love are so important to me, my animals too. So it's kind of like I can't leave them alone because I knew the shit. I'm sorry to say it like this, but I know the shit
No, no.
our world is about to go through. Like I've known
Yeah,
for like 6 years now. I saw these visions of things on the mountain with one of my spiritual teachers. So I was kind of like, in my head, I remember thinking, I can't leave them alone in that. Like, and I know that people don't
yeah,
listen to their spirit guides. Let's say I left, okay? And then
yeah.
like, you
Mhm.
think they're gonna sit and meditate and listen to me sending them messages to go eat kale? No, if I'm right next to them telling them you need to eat kale, that's a lot better. So I was like,
Yeah,
it was kind of like
yeah.
I was worried. I felt guilty and I'm like, God, I'm such a codependent angel. I should have just taken off and been like, my work is done here. But
I
I was
love it.
codependent, attached to people I love and the planet. I worry about the animals, nature, all the children, all the
Yeah.
planet.
So you spoke about our spirit guides speak to us in our dreams. Can you elaborate on that, or what are they? What's the central message that we may be missing, or how do we know? How do we kind of discern what's
When
just
the
the pizza
dreams
we
are
had last
important.
night, or
Some dreams
yeah,
are random and some dreams are messages, right?
yeah, yeah,
And some people have the green dream prophecy gifts. So let's say there's dream psychic abilities, and depending on people have different ones. And yeah, like let's say like you want to talk to a passed over loved one. You can think of them
mhm,
before you sleep, say a prayer, and say, "Hey, Grandma Kathy, like please come to my dream tonight." And then she will come to
yeah,
your dream. Another way is you can say, like, let's say you want to apply for a new job, like in whatever, someplace, but you don't
mhm,
know if it's a good job. So you can ask God or your spirit team, which I help people figure out, talk to their spirit team, that kind of stuff. But you can ask them like, hey, is this a good job for me? Send me a dream. And if that night you have a dream of like a tree burning or like a car crashing, that's your message. Like
yeah,
they're going to
yeah,
talk to you in symbols you understand. So like you said, like what I saw in my
mhm,
NDE, like God talks through symbols for most people. If you look, the whole universe
yeah,
is full of symbols. Tree of life is in all the religions, right? So, okay, so anyway, so that's the symbols. The other one is like if somebody's gonna pass. Some people know when their loved ones are gonna pass. So you might have a dream of like a family member passing. But sometimes you have a dream to stop something, you know? And those are the best ones. It's like maybe you have a dream of like something going wrong and you can warn someone.
yeah,
And yeah, so that kind of stuff. And it is important to put protection up when we sleep at night and to do some
right.
where we're being rejuvenated. We want to breathe Mother Earth's energy up into our body at night when we sleep, and during the day, kind of breathe in sunlight. So feminine and masculine balance. So if we do all that, we kind of have deep sleep, we'll get messages in our sleep.
So let's go into dark energies. It's
Okay.
clear that they're here. How do we recognize the dark energies? Are we surrounded by them, or do we invite them in some kind of way? Talk about dark energies.
So most people have them. Why do
Right.
we get them? We get them when we have traumas. let's say like your mom gets beaten when you're a kid, and this energy center, the meridian point in your tailbone now has a block in it, because that's when it was
Wow.
developing. Our spine is developing upwards. Those are our energy
Okay.
centers, right? And they go along the hormonal glands. So you'll have that blockage, and then an entity will come and feed on that energy blockage. Maybe like your mom was beaten and you were feeling scared. So there's fear there. So that is an entity of fear. And so your whole life,
Right.
you will have this fear, but you don't know why. And you're like, why can't I shake
Yeah.
off fear? And you'll go to some doctor and they'll put you on some pest medication, or whatever, and they try to silence that fear and whatever, but it doesn't go away, right? And or
Right.
manifest as cancer for people. So those are what entities do. But they get in the body, they feed on the emotions, and then they can also,
Right.
there's 3 levels of possession. So they can kind of like possess
Okay.
you fully. When you're fully possessed, that's when people are like shooting people, raping people, committing those crazy violent things. Is always demonic, or AI,
Wow.
now AI as
Yeah.
well. AI and demons are
Yeah.
connected. And ETs, there's evil ETs. Okay, so let's go
Yeah.
back though. So that's kind of there. As we go through trauma at different stages of our life, and there's energy blockages in our spine, is how they're going to attach. And there's different emotions. Like we store guilt in our sexual organs, men and women. That's why a lot of men and women get cancer down there, right? Then there's the stomach, which is our power center, and we store shame there. So most of humanity has shame, because the 3 Abrahamic religions constantly told people, you're bad kids, you're bad kids. And so shame is a part of humanity. So the entity will feed on shame. And then there's the
Yeah.
energy of sadness, which is like depression and worry, which a lot of humanity has right now as well. That's in the lungs.
Yeah.
Heart problems also are there. And then the demon of depression, sometimes when I work with teenagers, they literally draw it. They'll draw themselves with like this black thing around them, or I've had teenagers
Wow.
that were just like cutting themselves up and down their arm. And I remember seeing
Yeah.
the demon was attached to the left part of her arm where she was cutting. And
Yeah.
it's true, because once you remove the demon, they stop cutting, which is interesting, and like they haven't stopped for like 3 years. So in the clinics, we would try different methods, and we had a team of like psychiatrists, psychologists, and I was more like the spiritual energy always kind of,
Yeah.
But yeah, so
Yeah.
people are getting these entities and they're attached to them. And so when you go to therapy, they work on the trauma, or you go to spiritual healers, they can work on your energy body. But there's few people on the planet that can actually do upper demonic work, is what I'll say. Okay.
Is that a part of what's going on when we have a dark night of the soul? Is that similar? Like, is that what's going on at that moment?
Yeah, in
Okay.
the dark night of
So,
the soul, we're kind of like in the underworld part of our mind. Like, let's say we have an upper part of our mind, which is like the heavenly, which is like when we all have those experiences where we hear angels, see angels, talk to God. That's the heavenly part of our mind we all have. And then there's the day-to-day mind, which is like the tasks and the stuff, right? The ego, the personality of the day-to-day. And then there's the underworld. And the underworld is like where our traumas are, it's where our fear is, where our shadow lives, that kind of stuff. When we go through the dark night of soul, it's when we're stuck in the underworld and we're not allowed to come out till we learned a lesson. So it's a spiritual thing.
Ooh.
I interviewed a doctor that talks about the underworld, and she's an expert on it. But yeah, Carl
Okay.
Jung, which was a psychiatrist that worked with
Yeah.
Freud,
Yeah.
in my
Yeah.
opinion, if
Yeah.
Jung would have taken over the world of psychology, we would all be healed, because Freud really
Yeah.
didn't know what he was talking about. Okay.
Yeah.
But all
Yeah.
of American psychology is based on it. But in Europe, Jung is very respected. And so he talked about the underworld, and the dark night of soul is that. And it's not really a dark night, is it? You stay in the underworld till you're the 7 chakras, by the way. So you
Yeah.
have to master fear and all the different emotions and come out pure, basically. One story in the underworld, yeah, like you lose everything when you go in the underworld, and then you come out again, kind of thing. And a lot of cultures
That
talk
is,
about, yeah.
yeah, I love the picture you paint of that. How can we protect ourselves from these
And
kind of dark? Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so one thing that's really important is like clean, regular energy work. Actually, like it's
Mhm.
good to pray, but also you want to actually feel the energy of God come into you and literally clean your meridians. Like if you can't go to see a healer, you can Google pictures of meridians, pictures of chakras, and every day visualize the light of God cleaning you. And if you had a trauma, like make a timeline. I do this with people. Make a timeline of all the traumas as well as the good events of your life, and go back and clear all of them energetically. I do that with people. So I'm kind of like closing the holes in people's auras. But so that's something you can do. First, you want to close all the
Okay.
holes where they're able to access you, which is your traumas. But don't be scared,
Right.
because in the meantime, what you can do is ask God to put like a golden pyramid of light around you. You can ask to put, fire around you and your family, the blood of Christ, the light of the Buddha, Krishna. I listen to a lot of prayers and I put them loud in my house and I break up the sound, because like you would play psalms, or there's a prayer in Hinduism is called the Devi prayer, Devi prayer. In Hinduism, the
Mm.
Divine Mother kills all these demons. And I had one client who was an atheist that didn't believe in anything, and he was getting a lot of psychic attacks. So I was like, how do I help this guy? Because like I can't
Yeah.
convince him to pray, So I was
Yeah.
like, I
Yeah.
can't help him and he won't do anything. But when I told him
Right.
this prayer, he played it in his house and he said all the demons bowed and went away. And I was like, that prayer
Mm.
first, because he didn't even believe, and he never believed it, right? Devi prayer. I would
Yeah.
recommend that. It's free on YouTube. And so I would place sounds in the house. I would make sure you're cleaning your own energy. I would burn the herbs. You can do Palo Santo, whatever herb your religion says. I don't judge anybody's path as long as they're being a good person and helping humanity. To me, I respect you. So whatever herb you like,
Right.
burn it to cleanse the energy of the house. And don't watch like scary movies. Don't watch demonic
Okay.
movies. You're opening up portals. And
Okay.
just know that, study the shadow and what Carl Jung says about the shadow. So your own
Sure. Sure.
dark nature, right? Like we all have
Okay.
a dark nature as well. So once we understand our own dark nature, the demons can manipulate us through parts of ourselves we don't know, right? That's another thing, because sometimes people
Yeah.
are projecting as well, right? So.
Is connecting with God on a deeper level enough by itself to
Mhm.
clear all of that, or do we need to clear all of that and
Yeah,
connect with God?
both. I wish connecting to
Okay.
God was enough, but a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
think they're connected to God. They walk
Mm-hmm.
into my office and I'm just seeing them crawling with entities. And let's say how you're possessed. Let's talk about that, because I actually have a chart where I can actually check the emotion and then match it to the demon. For example, if
Yeah.
you're angry at your mother, or if you're angry at your father, you're going to have a demon called the destroyer. It's going to
Okay.
destroy your relationship with your parents. It's going to destroy your
Mm-hmm.
relationship with other people that
Mm.
remind you of your parents. And you're going to act like the destroyer demon. And so that
Wow.
demon, that's why people say, oh, that has a personality disorder. They have anger disorder. And I'm like, oh, no,
Yeah.
actually, they
Yeah.
actually have a destroyer demon inside of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Or
Misdiagnosed.
there can be
Yeah.
there's a demon called the saboteur. It's an actual demon that will come and sabotage your life. Like, let's say
Yeah.
tomorrow you have a really important date, like you'll suddenly get sick, or it'll convince you to go out too late the night before, or it'll send a distraction girl your way or distraction guy your way. Like demons love
Yeah.
sabotaging and making humans miserable. Why do they like doing that?
Wow.
Because that's how they get food. They're troublemakers.
They feed off of that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like important, right? Like we want to know our inner emotions and heal them. Otherwise, the demon will use your anger to hijack you.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's happened to
Yeah.
me, it's happened to my friends. Like I'm not saying it hasn't happened to me, because I've literally had it where I'm like, whoa, what was that anger? It just came out of me. And I'm like, that didn't feel me. It felt like something, I got angry. But once we removed that energy, I never got that anger again, right? I would still get angry if it was
Mm.
inappropriate,
Mm.
right? Like if somebody touches me inappropriate, I'll say, please don't do that, but I won't
Yeah.
like loud, which is what demons do. They make people throw things or be loud. For men, when they're beating women, or
Aggressive.
when
Yeah.
women are hitting children, they have demons inside of them.
How do we
Yeah.
lose our God self along this journey?
Exactly. That's the best question you ever asked, in my opinion, because I feel like my work is
Mhm.
to get people back to their child self. I always say, I know this person's healed when they act like the kid self they were, So that's actually my
Right.
sign. Yeah, because
Yeah.
like I always look at children from different ages. And even like the other day, I was at temple for Divine Mother, Divine Father celebrating, and I was looking
Yeah.
at the children. And I was like, when did they lose their joy? I was looking at a little girl, she was
Yeah.
4, and she was like dancing and just like having fun. And then there's this other teenager, and I asked her, how old are you? And she said, I'm 12. And she was already in a shame energy of a girl, her head a little down. She wasn't dancing. The other three teenage girls I saw, they were maybe 12. They had these beautiful princess dresses on. I was like, oh, they're so cute, you know? So I went up
Oh,
to
yeah.
them and I was like, I told one of the girls, I'm like, you are so pretty, you're a little princess. And
Oh,
and you know what she said to me, which I was surprised, but I'm not surprised because of social media and what it's doing to girls. She's like, thank you for telling me I'm pretty. And I was like, you're gorgeous.
oh,
I was like, how could I not say that when you're such a princess? But
yeah.
so she was already doubting herself. She was already having self-esteem issues. She's already having anxiety. She's 12 years old, but the little girl at 4 didn't have it. So at what point do humans suddenly, if you think of the Bible story of like the Garden of Eden, when does shame come in? Because God just wants
Mhm.
us to be children, eat the food, be nice to each other,
Yeah.
follow
Yeah.
the laws, you know, in whatever religion you want to choose, just be a good person. He doesn't care. I
Right.
promise he doesn't care. And in
Right.
the Bible, they get shame. So children at some point get shame. I'm not enough. If I go and dance, suddenly they're going to think I'm crazy. When does a little girl stop dancing? That's my question.
Yeah.
And for little boys, why is it that little boys aren't allowed to go be in nature during the school day, right? So they're kind of
Yeah.
like stuck in a classroom. So they're repressing their masculine energy, which is adventure, right? Like men used to go and hunt whatever in the forest together and that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. So when do we crush the spirit of little boys and children? That's when people stop being connected to their God self. Now, how can they get
Mm.
connected back to it is they have to heal
Yeah.
that trauma. Now, if we catch
Yeah.
it early, we can, that's why like if children have therapy at 4, 6, 7, that's great. Like you catch it early, you heal it, the kid comes back. But when a trauma happens at 12, it's not treated till 37, they have
Yeah.
24 years of programming that now has to be fixed.
True.
And
True.
sometimes it can
True.
be done short, right? But we can
Yeah.
always get back to our God self. In my opinion, a shortcut is like sit every day and talk to God actually and say,
Okay.
hey God, like I don't know if you're real or if you're real, but I really want to have a
Yeah.
relationship with you. And I don't want anything from you. I'm not talking to you because I want a Ferrari or a car or a girlfriend or a boyfriend. I just want to have a
Yeah.
friendship with you and just be genuine.
Ooh.
That every day,
Ooh.
be
Yeah.
God's friend. Because
Yeah.
God has
Yeah.
everything. God doesn't need anything
Yeah.
from you or me, or I'm not special because God talks to me like he's special. He, Divine Mother and Divine
Right.
Father are so special, right? And we all have God inside of all of us too, though. So we are also all
Mhm.
special. But that's my suggestion. If you feel like you don't have a connection with God or you don't know if God is real, God, source, the force, Christ,
Mhm.
Krishna, Divine Mother, whatever you call it, Allah, spirit, nature, just sit down and be genuine and be like, I know I'm not perfect. Like I've done these good things, these bad things, and I want help with this. Like I am in a lot of trouble in this area. Test God. I always tell
Right.
people, test God, but also
Yeah.
show a genuine friendship. Like God, people come to me and they're like, I prayed and God didn't answer. And I'm like, oh, really? Okay. So how many days have you sat in prayer and meditation, talking to God and giving to God first? And they tell me they
Yeah.
didn't do that much. And I'm like, why are you expecting so much when you're not putting anything in? Like with spirituality,
Mm.
everything is
Mhm.
earned. There is no like inherent, you get to talk to God. I'm sorry. Yes,
Yeah.
we all have an intuition, but we've all been on the planet so many lifetimes now where a lot of us don't have good enough karma to hear God. You know, we have to earn it. So, and I've
Yeah.
had moments in my life where I heard God really clearly and moments where I've lost it, where I remember
Sure.
being in
Sure.
like depression and I couldn't hear God. And I was like, oh no, I have to come back to myself to connect to God again. So it's not like a
Yeah.
constant, it's like an earned day-to-day thing. But it is beautiful, I think. And people can all have it if they just actually love God for just nothing.
Last question. Um, you mentioned that we keep coming back. And obviously, we're accumulating or releasing stuff when we come back. Why do we continue to come back, would you say?
We come back because we haven't graduated. You know, we haven't finished our karma or our sin or our lessons, you know, like you want to, maybe you're here to be a teacher. So you have a lesson, a soul lesson of being a teacher, or you have a soul lesson of helping humanity or whatever. So we have to finish those lessons, you know, but sometimes we also have karma, and karma sin means we did something bad in another lifetime and we're kind of doing things to, you know, work it out. And it doesn't mean we're bad, but A lot of people are burning karma. When we hurt others, that instantly gives us karma, you know? So even if it's little or big things, so and we all do it, it's okay. We all make mistakes and we can make amends, you know, so don't be hard on yourself. But if we're here, it means we haven't graduated. There is few people on the planet that are teachers that are choosing to stay. I'm not, you know, I'm just a human. I'm just like a little lady, you know, but there's true teachers on the planet that are very advanced that are here with us and they're choosing to stay. They don't have to be here. They're
Yeah.
already graduated. And actually, after you become enlightened, it's really hard to stay on the planet. But that is actually what we're all supposed to do now. Like that's the purpose, the new kingdom, the new earth, that kind of thing. We're all supposed to raise our vibration, be our God self, and like shine that light of God. And that's the plan God actually wants. But it is going to be harder to stay on the planet because as your vibration changes, your body is going to feel different physical symptoms. You're going to have emotional symptoms, spiritual symptoms. So it's going to be a storm. We have to stay in the eye of the storm with our daily tools, whatever everybody does, you know, to balance their mind, body, emotion, and spirit and energy, the
Yeah.
5 elements. Then we're going to get through the next 9-10 years as we all kind of do this next part of the path.
Gotcha. So I'm gonna ask this question, last question, and then we're gonna
Thank
go
you.
into how people can get in touch with you. Whether based on your life in this moment or based on what you experienced in your NDE, what's one thing you want to leave us with? Like, if we don't get anything else, you want to make sure we get this.
Okay. The most important thing is if you just kind of close your eyes and you feel the center of your chest, you'll feel your heart beating, right? And inside of
Mhm.
that beating heart is a tiny little fire. And this is the fire of God. It's the fire of hope. It's the fire of hope.
Mm,
And it never goes out unless you choose to put it
yeah,
out. I
yeah,
want you to remember this, that you have the fire of God in your heart. And I want you to
right.
actually breathe into it and feel it. That's going to be the thing that would be the most important thing I want you to, because that's what God told me. He said, if you teach people nothing else,
Yeah,
teach them how to connect to me in their heart. So that's how I teach people to connect to God, because then you actually feel it. It's not like my mind
yeah.
telling you. So yeah.
So having said that, how can people reach out to you, maybe work with you, and learn more about what you do?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for asking that. And yes, I'm so glad you're helping people connect to God in their
Yeah,
heart. And yes, people
yeah.
can get in touch with me on my website, which is soulradiancehealing.com. And just, you know, send me a message and I'll be happy to do work with them and be of support. And yeah, just really grateful to be here and happy to be of service. So thank you for having me.
Love it. And all of that information will be in the description below. And having said that, as I always close out to all my listeners, I love you and I appreciate you. And both Dr. Dianata and I both say goodbye
Goodbye.
for
Have a
now.
beautiful day. God bless you.